Hi, I'm here to talk to you about lesson 1.3. This is our value sort lesson, which is one of our most beloved lessons and activities. This is still in Unit 1, where students will understand the term good work as defined by excellence, ethics, and engagement. And the lesson goal is for students to be able to identify and articulate the values that are most important to them. Hopefully, students will be able to understand how their values relate to good work. They might be able to apply it to a particular situation or example. And then ultimately, we hope they'll do a class discussion and be able to talk about how their values are in alignment or not in alignment with the class. That will be in the next lesson more so. But so they're really able to actually work with those values. There's 4 sections. The opener is where the teacher really pulls up the value sort either online or shows them the actual physical worksheet that they might work with and just gives an example, models it for the students. The next part is where the students really engage in the value sort themselves, again, online or via paper worksheet. Then bringing them back together, the students engage in a class discussion with the teacher about their value sort. And then finally, there is a homework activity. So starting off, the teacher pulls up the value sort online. So again, we have here pztools.org/value sort. So you can go to www.pztools.org/value sort. Now, this is the number one way that we would suggest that you do the value sort. And if you are interested in learning more about how to use this particular tool and how to use an event code so that you can make sure you can aggregate the responses from your whole class, we have a video on that now. And I have a link for you here. That is I'm going to post it right here. But if you go to our thegoodproject.org/community of practice, you'll see we have a video using the PZ Tools value sort to learn about your class's values. So you can go right there and you'll have a video and it will explain how to use the PZ Tools value sort version and explain the event code process and everything like that. This is the number one way we suggest for teachers in particular to use it because then you'll be able to see all of your class's values together at the end. However, we also have another version for individuals, where if you just go to thegoodproject.org/value sort, you'll see here that if you click here to access the value sort tool, it takes you to a Qualtrics version where you can also fill out the value sort. But however, this won't aggregate your class's scores for you. It will just show an individual report at the end. So each student would have their own individual report, but you as the teacher won't know what the overall values are for the whole class. But that is another way for your students to do the value sort. Finally, we also have this worksheet version where students can do the value sort. Each student could have a worksheet. They can put their values into the worksheet and they can you could print out perhaps the value sort cards, which again, if you click on this link, oops, sorry, not that one. If you click on this link and you scroll down, you'll see we have a link here. Click here for value sort cards. If you download it, open it up, and then there's also a way you can do it here on this sheet, but then there's all these different values. In this first activity, we asked for a teacher to model and talk aloud about how they would do the value sort activity. So for example, they could say something like, okay, so if efficient work habits were very important for my life, let's say that I really value being quick in your work. I really think that everybody should just really try and focus and get their work done quickly. I might put that in my top 4 values. But let's say I think that I'm not very religious. I don't think faith is important. I would put that in my bottom 4 least important values. But let's say I'm like pretty neutral about fame and success. I don't really think it's that important. I'm just sort of like, whatever, like, yeah, maybe it's good to have it, but maybe it's not that good to have it. I might put that in the middle, and put it somewhere where it's sort of like not that important. So that would be in this sort of middle 10 cards here on the worksheet, for example. Then in this next activity, that's where the students really do it themselves. So you would give them either the link to the PC Tools version or the link to the individual online version, or you would give them the cards, the physical worksheet of cards, and the actual physical worksheet here on the right-hand side. You would then collect their responses so that you could report on it in the next class, but I'll talk in lesson 1.4's video about ways that you can do that. And then students should add these values and maybe some writing about it to their portfolio. If you need to cut something, I would cut this next activity of having a class discussion. Unfortunately, doing the value sort is such an important element, sort of future elements of the lesson plans. It's really important to do that element of the lesson. However, you also could think about having them do the value sort on their own as a homework, potentially before this lesson if you really wanted to make time to have the class discussion in the lesson. So there's different ways to think about that. Another thing to really emphasize before students do the value sort and before you have the discussion is the fact that these values are not permanent. These are not something that if they give their values as these today, that they need to be stable for the rest of time. They don't need to think, oh, I put curiosity top today, so now I need to think that I'm always going to put curiosity, as my number one thing for the rest of time. So it's important to emphasize that these are their values now, and values can change or values can be different in different situations. So really sharing that there might be differences at different times and in different places. So bringing them back to have a class discussion going over these questions. It's also important to note that there are worksheets attached to the worksheets that are in the lesson plan. These are optional worksheets. They go along with sort of our activity of the value sort that's outside of the lesson plans. So they don't align with the questions that we have for the class discussion written up here. So you could have the students do this if there's time, if there's extra time and you want them to do a little bit more reflection on their value sort. If they're in student groups, let's say, and you say, okay, while you're waiting, why don't you discuss the discussion questions with one another? Or if you just want to have them think about them for a little bit more inspiration for the class discussion, they're there to be inspiration. They're there as, as something you can use, but they're not a requirement by any means. So you come back, you have a full group class discussion. You also, of course, could put them in student groups to discuss this. And then you assign the student homework, which is really for them to think about an individual or type of work that they believe exemplifies one of their top values. They could also do maybe one of their bottom values. You can really decide what you would like them to talk about. For example, maybe they think about a teacher that really loves learning or a teacher that's really curious if that was one of their top values. And then they spend 15 minutes writing about that. Again, you can always change this activity. It doesn't have to be writing. It could be creating a video. It could be, doing a piece of artwork. It could be creating a podcast. You can always think about other alternatives. It doesn't have to be writing. And then they add that as well to their portfolio. So that's an overview of lesson 1.3. And I hope that's helpful. All right, thanks.